right, we are recording. My kid's in the room with me. He's in his little chair. He's like 6 weeks old. He might fall asleep. I may have to edit out his cries if it gets to be annoying. I did just finish this, guys, and I have my thoughts here. There are some spoilers down below, so just know that I'm going to do a pretty honest and critical review of this book, and we'll discuss some parts of the book towards the end, so if you haven't read it and you don't want any of that ruined, just be aware that it's coming. So I have, if you follow me on Social Galactic, which most of you probably do, you know I'm all about these leather-bound books right now, and I just finished this Castalia Library version, so that's not the goat skin, it's the cowhide. It's still very, very high quality. I love it. I mean, it just all these Castalia books feel really nice in the hand. So when I get a new Castalia book, I pretty much put all the other books I'm reading on hold until I've done it. And I have the Divine Comedy now, and as soon as I record and upload this video, I'm going to unwrap it and start reading it. This version of Meditations isn't just the 12 books by Marcus Aurelius. It is also, it basically also has an introduction to Stoicism. It has a short history on Christian persecution, and it also has a biography of Marcus Aurelius in it. I did really like that aspect of it, and I went online and checked on Amazon to look at the other Meditations prints that are sold to see if they're like that. And they kind of are, but not the same. They do include some extra materials similar. Let me give him this pacifier. Where'd that go? There you go, buddy. There you go. They do include some extra materials, but they're not exactly the same. So this book is definitely unique to Castalia, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. For me, it's pretty obvious, though, why you always hear stuff like, well, the greatest military leaders around the world from time immemorial carry this book with them wherever they go. And I'll tell you why. Yes, I mean, there's tons of awesome lessons from Roman Stoicism in there, and Marcus Aurelius is one of the key figures of Stoicism. But it's not an easy read. It just isn't. And I'll be discussing that in a minute, but essentially, you know, you hear about like James Mattis and other leaders of the U.S. military and other militaries around the world always carrying this book with them is because they got to reread it. I mean, all the points that Marcus Aurelius talks about, I myself, here, I might even be able to show you, I had to read Cliff Notes after every chapter because I wanted to make sure that I was getting the lessons, right? So I went to this website, shmoop.com. You can look this up, but all these books are here, so you can reread the book through this to kind of have some cliff notes. But I recommend you do that after. Don't just read this and say you read Meditations. No, you need to read Meditations, and then you need to go and do those cliff notes to make sure you're really hitting those points home. But it's a harder read, and that's why those generals carry it with them. It's not like the Bible or some kind of holy book. It's just that they probably need to reread it over and over again, and I certainly will be rereading it in a couple years because there's a chock full of really good wisdom in there that I for sure will not remember. And on that note, this book was a very, very clear sign to me about my own shortcomings, and that is I have a much harder time reading a book like this than I do The Missionaries or Awaken the Nightland, because those are narratives, those are stories, they're entertaining. You start imagining what the characters look like, what the worlds look like as described in the books, and you go along with the story, and they're really hard to put down. Marcus Aurelius, dude, is not hard to put down. It's kind of easy to cast it aside to read another book like what I just described, which I think I did at one point. I can't remember which book it was, but looking back on my bookshelf, I most definitely paused this book at one point to finish another book and then came back to it because this style of writing is very lecture-based. It's like, probably the reason I didn't do great in school for the most part is because most of my classes were hard to understand because I'm being talked at the whole time, which is more like, almost maybe more like a Socratic method as opposed to a Platonic method where you're immersing yourself by activity or going along with the story. So like, this book really helped me understand my own personal shortcomings, that I'm probably going to like the entertaining books more so than the lecture-based books. I probably learn better from a story-based learning than a lecture-based learning. So it's no fault of the book, but just know that this book, if you're like me, is going to be less entertaining than the other books. Doesn't mean I don't like it, just means it's less entertaining. In fact, I love this book. This book is, I mean, physically beautiful, but there's a reason it's a classic. There's a reason why it did make Marcus Aurelius immortal in a sense, even though he talks about dying and being irrelevant all the time in like every book of Meditations. It's kind of funny how that worked out for him. So let me go into a little bit more of the intricacies of the book where this could be deemed a spoiler. So you want to turn the video off now or just keep that in mind. There is a biography, right? And the biography was probably, in my opinion, the most entertaining part. The hardest parts to read were the meditations themselves, but even harder than that was the introduction to Stoicism. That was tough to get through. But the biography is awesome. It gives a really good context of his life and why he was so wise in these Stoic manners. I mean, basically, he was homeschooled. He was brought up by the finest private teachers. Eventually, he was even kind of tapped for leadership. Hang on one second. I'm going to give this pacifier, buddy. There you go. He was eventually, they knew from the get-go that this kid was something special. And so I can't remember exactly how, but as an adult, he gets adopted into a more political family. It's either Hadrian himself, like the emperor's family, or like the emperor's son. I can't remember, like, but he basically gets put in line to be emperor, and they even tell him, like, hey, we know you're engaged to so-and-so, but if you can just cancel that engagement and marry our daughter Faustina, you will eventually become emperor. He thought about it, and he did it. Faustina, not a good woman, as you will read in that biography. And Marcus, being such a Stoic, didn't let him bother him, apparently. She was a slut, guys. I also noticed this, the introduction to Stoicism was hard to get through, but one thing that I definitely couldn't help but notice is that there seemed to be a lot of similarities between early Stoicism and alchemy. And alchemy is definitely a Greek thing too, as far as I know. At least it started off that way. And I don't know if that's coincidental. Here you go, buddy. There you go. Why don't you go lay on the floor if you don't want to be in your chair, okay? That's basically it, though, guys. I mean, it's a really good book. I'm going to try to do a video like this every time I finish one of these library books. And now I get to go unwrap this beautiful Divine Comedy, and I'm going to start reading that. So, thanks so much. Have a good one.